First, your car will come to an end. Then, so will you. My name's Jack Turner, and in Rust Creek, Pennsylvania, everything dies slow. The steel mill, the marriages, the truth. This morning I found a pregnancy test cooling on our kitchen counter like a shell casing. 3 days ago, I pulled a blister pack of blue pills out of my wife's purse, tucked under lipstick and breath mints like contraband. She says she's tired. I sell used cars. I know the sound of a bad lie. In towns like ours, secrets don't stay parked for long. They leak, they stain, they leave a trail. So I did what any man with something left to lose does. I started listening. To the late-night buzz of her phone, to the rumble of a red Mustang I don't recognize, to the silence between us that feels like a tow chain tightening. If you think this is a love story, you're about to learn otherwise. Name's Jack Turner, 50 years old, owner of Turner's Auto on the edge of Rust Creek, Pennsylvania. I buy beaters, clean them up, sell them honest. My hands are nicked from wrenches, my back argues with the morning. I grew up here, where the river carries grit and the air remembers smoke. Folks know me by the handshake and the payment plan. I know engines by ear, a sticky lifter, a tired belt. Trouble before it strands a family on the shoulder. That is my living, listening for what is about to fail. At home, I drink my coffee black and read the classifieds out of habit. I keep spare keys on a hook shaped like a trout. I lock up at 9, count the till, kill the lights. That routine kept me steady when the town wasn't. Then one ordinary Tuesday, the rhythm slipped, like a gear that refuses to catch. That was the first quiet warning I ignored. Rust Creek used to hum. The mill lit the sky at shift change, and Friday nights the Union Hall smelled like chili and beer. Then the furnace cooled, the owners left, and the parking lots grew weeds tall enough to wave. Storefronts went dark one by one until you could walk 3 blocks and only hear your own boots. People stayed because leaving costs more than a mortgage. You do what you know. Patch roofs, swap parts, stretch paychecks, and tell yourself next winter will bite less. On Sundays, the diner still pours coffee, and the same 3 men argue about the Steelers like that could raise payroll. In a town like ours, news travels faster than good luck. A flat tire, a layoff, a late rent check, the details fly from porch to porch, and shame sticks to clapboard like old paint. That is why we speak softly here. We know echoes. We know how they come back, every time. Home for me is a modest cape with peeling paint and a maple that drops too many leaves. Linda keeps the kitchen neat, the counters wiped, the towels folded in thirds. She works at Grant's General Store, knows every regular by first name, and never forgets who prefers paper over plastic. Our daughter Emily is 13, all elbows and opinions, soccer cleats by the door, math worksheets on the table. She twirls her hair when she thinks, the way her mother once did. We eat dinner together nightly. Meatloaf Mondays, spaghetti Wednesdays, whatever fits the budget on Fridays. I fix what I can and call a man for what I cannot. We are not fancy, but we are ours, or so I believed. The truth is, you can live with someone 12 years and still miss the moment the light in their eyes changes. You notice later, like spotting a dent after a wash, wondering how long it's been there. People think a marriage breaks like a windshield, one clean shatter. Mostly it clouds over time, like fog creeping across glass. We still paid bills on time. We still sent birthday cards to her mother. We still argued over temperature and where the salt shaker went. We still laughed, just not together. If you are my age, you know this drift. Work takes your best hours. Fatigue spends the rest. You tell yourself it is a season. Then the season stays. I kept pictures from our early years on the mantle. A cheap honeymoon at the shore, her hair in the wind, sand stuck to our ankles. I looked at those frames like a mechanic looks at a car that once ran sweet. You don't rebuild the whole engine for a rattle, you tell yourself. You turn up the radio and drive. The night I did that, I missed the new sound. The one that meant the damage had already started. 3 days before everything snapped, I was hunting for a spare pen in Linda's purse. She always carries too much. Receipts, church bulletins, mint wrappers, a ceramic angel Emily gave her in 2nd grade. My fingers found a blister pack tucked beneath a lipstick. Blue tablets. Not vitamins. Not for her. I am not a jealous man by nature. I am a practical man. I know what those pills do and why a woman would carry them if she wanted something to work that should have been someone else's job. I stood there by the sink with the sun striping the counter, hearing the fridge hum like a bad bearing. Linda came in, smiled, asked if I had seen her keys. I said no and slipped the pack back where it was. That was the first lie I told that week, and it tasted metallic, the way blood does when you bite your tongue to keep from speaking. That night. Later that week I came home early. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something faintly floral that wasn't ours. On the counter sat a white stick inside an open box. I knew what it was before I touched it. The display was blank, used, and waiting. My name was not on any of it, but my life suddenly was. You can be 50 and still feel 19 in the wrong moment. Your chest goes hollow. Your ears ring. You start counting months you know can't add up. I wanted to ask. I wanted not to know. The funny thing about evidence is how ordinary it looks. Plastic on laminate, sun on chrome, and yet it can move a man's center of gravity. I slid the test behind the coffee canister, the way you slide a bad part back into a drawer and tell yourself you will deal with it tomorrow. Then the door opened, and she called my name. After that, I started paying real attention. Linda's phone began buzzing at odd hours, face down on the table like a secret with a heartbeat. She straightened magazines that didn't need straightening. She cleaned a clean sink. She laughed, but her eyes stayed elsewhere, as if someone had moved the horizon. Small things tell on you. She wore new perfume that fought the detergent on her blouse. She bought underwear the color of trouble, tags still in the trash. She said she was closing late at the store, and I nodded like a man who believes in overtime. In the mirror, I looked tired, but I did not look surprised. When you sell used cars, you spot mismatched paint in the first 5 seconds. I could see the overspray on our life. I wanted to yank the whole thing apart on the spot. Instead, I filed each detail away like an invoice and waited for the noise to grow louder. We stopped touching without meaning to. Bedtime turned into a truce line of blankets. We faced away and pretended it was about the fan. At breakfast, she scrolled and I checked auction lists. We passed like neighbors who share a fence and avoid a lawsuit. Married people will understand. It is not a fight you can point at. It is a fog you agree to live inside. We spoke logistics. Who's driving Emily? Who's getting milk? Who's paying the water bill by Thursday? Her ring flashed when she talked, but the shine felt borrowed. I stood in the garage some nights just to breathe oil and dust and remember that machines can be honest. If they are broken, they tell you. They knock. They squeal. People fail quieter. One night I reached across the sheets anyway. She flinched like a skittish colt. I told myself it was sleep. Lying there, I knew the distance had become a map. We followed. By then, suspicion was not a feeling. It was a schedule. 3 nights a week she worked late. 3 mornings a week she was tired in a different way. The math did not care about my hope. I started writing down little things on an index card in my wallet. Times, places, smells. A receipt from the grocery in a neighborhood we never use. A smudge of glitter that did not come from our house. A song stuck in her head that I heard later purring from a car I did not recognize. I did not raise my voice. A man can lose his temper and his daughter in the same afternoon. I made coffee, went to work, kept my mouth shut, and let the card fill up. On Saturday night I turned it over and realized I had run out of room. When you reach the edge, you either fold or you act. I decided to act. That night. After the pregnancy test, I watched how Linda looked through me. Not past me, through me, like a storefront window with a reflection she preferred. At breakfast, she asked about inventory and stared at the toaster. In the car, she adjusted mirrors that didn't need adjusting. People in our age bracket know this dance. You talk about errands, so you don't talk about truth. When we said grace at dinner, her amen landed short, as if she didn't want God as a witness. Emily didn't notice. Kids see what you show them. I told myself to be steady, like a man holding a steering wheel on black ice. But eye contact tells you what receipts can't. Linda's used to look like a porch light, warm, steady, calling me in. Now it flickered, humming with a current I couldn't trace. I set my fork down, folded my napkin, and made a private promise. I would find the wire. That afternoon, I was fixing a sticky cabinet hinge when Linda's phone buzzed on the counter. She was folding towels upstairs. I didn't touch the screen. I'm not that man. The voicemail icon pulsed like a heartbeat. Then the kitchen filled with a voice I didn't recognize. Young, smooth, careless. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. Last night was, yeah, same time? A laugh, a throat clear, the kind of grin you can hear. It cut off as Linda's footsteps reached the stairs. I closed the cabinet, the hinge now obedient, and wiped my hands on a dish towel that suddenly felt borrowed. She walked in, smiled too bright, asked if the cabinet behaved. I said yes. The phone was face down again, as if the countertop might learn to read. Married folks my age get this. Technology turns secrets into roommates. I breathed slow through my nose and filed the voice away. It would matter. The store posted shorter hours for winter, but Linda's shifts stretched longer. She said inventory, end caps, vendor counts. I've run a business long enough to smell padded time. On Monday, her coat was still cold when she came home close to 10. On Wednesday, her hair smelled like a different soap. On Friday, she said she grabbed coffee after close and the receipt in the trash can read a neighborhood we never use. If you're from a small town, you know how a clock can be a compass. The hands point where people really are. I didn't accuse. Men our age learn how one wrong sentence can split a house like bad lumber. Instead, I checked my own hours, tightened what I could, and kept my tone even. Be safe, I said at the door, like any good husband. She kissed my cheek on autopilot and missed. The calendar on the wall flipped itself in my head. A pattern formed. Laundry is honest. It doesn't rehearse. Saturday morning, I sorted colors on the basement table, same as always. T-shirts, towels, Emily's socks that disappear in pairs. In the bottom of Linda's basket lay a scrap of black lace, so new it carried the store's fold. I am not a prude and I am not blind. Married people buy nice things to remember who they were. But this wasn't for remembering, this was performance. I held it like evidence and felt foolish doing it. 50-year-old men holding underwear in a basement don't feel powerful. I set it down, let the washer fill, and listened to the water climb. The sound felt like a lie getting heavier. Upstairs, the TV murmured a Saturday game. Emily asked for pancakes. I flipped them, smiled, and kept one eye on the stairs. I didn't need a confession. The house had already started talking. I just needed to decide whether to answer back. On Thursday, a text preview flashed across Linda's screen while she stirred sauce. Tonight was incredible. Can't wait for tomorrow. My name wasn't on it, but my pulse was. She turned the phone over so quick the spoon clanged. Hot, she said, meaning the sauce, but her cheeks told a truer story. I tasted nothing at dinner. Later, in bed, the room's dark felt crowded. There's a point in middle age when you stop pretending time is endless. You can hear it move, like the tick behind a dashboard. That text wasn't poetry. It was logistics disguised as romance. I stared at the ceiling and counted the beats between her breaths. They didn't match the day she'd described. In the morning, I poured coffee stronger and watched frost etch the kitchen window. People like us don't go looking for trouble. We're too busy paying for what we already have. But trouble knows how to find a porch light. I started sorting details like parts on a shop towel, the voice on voicemail, the coffee receipt, the black lace, the text preview. Then one afternoon, the phone lit up in her purse while she was in the shower. I didn't open it. I noted the fragment that glowed. T. That single letter felt like a headlight through fog. I thought through every T in Linda's day. Tom at produce. Too old. Tina. Not a T I feared. The supplier's driver. Travels nights, married, 3 kids. No. The letter sat in my chest like a bolt missing from a mount. You don't see it fail, you feel the rattle. I am not clever, but I am thorough. I grabbed a small notebook, the kind I use for VINs, and wrote T at the top. Under it, a list of places she could be at 7. I didn't need a surname yet. An initial was enough to start the engine. At Grant's General Store, I bought rock salt and small talk. I watched who laughed with Linda, who looked away too fast, who called her hon like they'd earned it. The assistant manager wears a wedding band he polishes with habit. The cashier with butterfly clips is 19 and says sir even when you beg her not to. The delivery guy for the bread route nods like a man who's late somewhere else. I asked about schedules without sounding like I was asking. Middle-aged men can do that. We've practiced around teenagers and tax auditors. By the time I paid, I had crossed off 3 names and scribbled 2 new maybes. None fit clean. That bothered me. Affairs like scams leave fingerprints. This one wore gloves. Back in my truck, I sat with the heat on and the list in my lap. Rust Creek isn't big. If I watched the roads instead of the faces, maybe the truth would drive by. Friday, I told Rosa I'd be late to the lot and parked across from the store's back alley with a cup of gas station coffee cooling in my hand. The day lifted slow and gray. Delivery trucks sighed. A stray dog inspected yesterday's French fries. Linda's Civic rolled in, settled into her usual spot. She didn't go inside. She stared at her phone, thumbs moving, face still. 10 minutes later, I heard it. A throaty rumble that didn't belong to this street. A red Mustang GT slid into view, stripes bright enough to offend the morning. It idled beside her with the patience of a bad idea. She smiled in a way I hadn't seen since the shore. She leaned toward the driver's window like the car itself had whispered her name. I took a breath that didn't go anywhere. In a small town, loud cars are peacocks. They want to be seen. Fine, I saw it, and I kept seeing. He stepped out of the Mustang to stretch. Late 20s, gym proud, jaw you could shelve a wrench on, sunglasses even with no sun, boots too clean for actual work, the kind of body that photographs well and bruises easy. I've carried transmissions. I know the difference. He laughed with Linda and leaned against his door, claiming space like a billboard. He had that loose confidence of someone who's only lost games that didn't count. In the reflection of a shop window, I watched him watch her. He touched his own face when she smiled, like he liked who he was in her eyes. Boys chase that mirror, men bury it. I don't hate young men, I was one. But I recognize a tourist when I see one. He doesn't live with bills, basements, or apologies. He revs and moves on. I wrote Mustang Red GT in my notebook, underlined it twice and added one word I knew was true: problem. You can tell a lot from a laugh. There's the polite chuckle for church basements, the tight laugh you give bosses. Then there's the one your body remembers from being 20 and invincible. That's the laugh she used, head thrown a fraction too far back, hand touching the car's frame like it might steady her. She reached through his window and brushed his cheek with her fingertips. Not a dramatic touch, an intimate one. A married man feels that on the inside of his ribs. I didn't take a picture. I took a breath, tasted metal, and saw the years we had shrunk to a line on the road behind me. The Mustang purred away. Linda went inside the store with the face she wears for customers. In my truck mirror, I looked older than I had that morning. I turned the key, let the engine catch, and decided. Evidence before anger. Proof travels farther than a punch. Back at the lot, I stacked paperwork like sandbags, titles, bills of sale, the week's deposits. Rosa asked if I was okay. I said yes in a voice I didn't recognize. Men my age know this choice. Fire your mouth and burn your own house, or keep your hands busy until your head cools. I loaded a battery onto the charger, wiped down a hood, and called a customer to say their brakes were finally right. Every task kept me from driving to the store and making a scene Rust Creek would still be chewing on at Christmas. At lunch, I wrote a sentence at the top of my notebook. Don't lose Emily to rage. That steadied me better than prayer. When I finally looked up, the sun had shifted, and I had a plan more useful than a fist. Restraint isn't weakness. It's choosing the fight that pays you back. I closed the office door and picked my battlefield. That evening, I slid onto a cracked vinyl stool at Murphy's and ordered a beer that knew my name. Bars like Murphy's keep 2 things on tap: cheap lager and information. I asked about the red Mustang the way fishermen ask about weather. Jimmy said he'd seen it peeling out near the high school lots. Maria rolled her eyes and said the driver liked his reflection more than his receipts. Big Mike, who knows every tow in 3 counties, said the plates were local, bought from Rick's Auto last spring. No one said Tyler yet. They didn't need to. In small towns, we sketch in pencil and wait for ink. I left a tip that made the bartender remember my questions and took a slow walk past the parking lot. A fresh patch of oil dotted the asphalt like Morse code. The car had been here. The driver would be back. I had the make, the sound, the habit. I only needed a name. I didn't have to wait long. Saturday afternoon, the game was on and the bar was loud with people trying not to go home yet. He came in wearing that same swagger, ordered a whiskey like it was a business card, and told a story to anyone who'd listen. Married, classy, older, can't keep her hands off me. The boys laughed. The older men didn't. Someone called him Ty, and another said, "Grant, you're gonna get yourself hurt." He smirked like warnings were applause. I didn't turn my head. I let the mirror behind the bottles do the work. He fit the voice and the car and the grin. Tyler Grant. The name sat just right. Grant. Same as the sign above Linda's workplace. Grant's General Store. Blood ties. The kind of town where hiring family means covering tracks. Suddenly, it wasn't just betrayal in a parking lot. It was a noose tied to her paycheck. I finished my beer, paid, and stepped into the evening cool. The neon sign buzzed like a bad alternator. Behind me, he kept talking. The thing about bragging is it sows witnesses. I had enough to circle in red. Now I needed the line to connect. Humiliation is different when it's private. You can patch it in the dark and no one sees the seam. Public is another matter. Rust Creek has a way of letting news walk itself down Main Street. By Sunday, I could feel looks that weren't looks yet. The diner got quiet when I stepped in. A couple of heads bent too fast over coffee. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I didn't. At our age, pride doesn't puff your chest. It protects your spine. You stand up because slumping hurts more. I ate my eggs, tipped heavy, and walked to church where the hymns sounded flatter than last week. The pastor preached on forgiveness, and I counted ceiling tiles. After service, a neighbor asked if I'd seen a red Mustang in town, casual as weather. I said I had and smiled like small talk. Walking home, I understood the bruise had turned visible. I needed to choose what kind of scar it would leave. By Monday, investigation wasn't a hobby. It was a job with hours. I set a cheap GPS unit on the workbench and practiced the mount until I could do it blind. I printed a blank calendar and blocked the nights Linda closed late. I noted Tyler's usual haunts, Murphy's, the strip of garages near Rick's, the alley behind Grant's. I wrote license digits as anchors in my head. I told Rosa I might be in and out and gave her a raise I'd been meaning to give, because loyalty deserves daylight. At dusk, I parked 2 streets over from the Blue Star Motel and traced the pattern of cars coming and going. Neon buzzed, curtains breathed. I held a thermos that kept my hands honest. When the red Mustang finally rolled in and the room light clicked on, I didn't move. I didn't rage. I watched the door, memorized the number, and felt something inside me settle into gear. Now it was my turn. I waited until the Mustang slept, backlot behind Murphy's, lights half dead, music leaking from the bar. I slid on a creeper like I have 100 times under trade-ins, palms flat, breath slow. I didn't need a gadget. I needed proof you could hold in court. So I parked across the lot with my phone angled through the windshield. Time-stamped photos, the Mustang pulling in, room 12's light clicking on. Machines don't lie. Neither do motel receipts. A dot lit the map like a new star over Rust Creek. The phone pulsed once, then settled to a quiet beat. Machines tell you the truth when people won't. I set the alert and drove home in silence. The next evening, the dot woke me before supper. It drifted out of town, past the shuttered mill, down the 2-lane toward the county line. I told Emily I'd be late and that Rosa had me on a parts run. Linda said nothing, just wiped a spot that wasn't there. I took the back road and watched the screen more than the sky. The dot stopped where Neon goes to retire, the Blue Star Motel, paint flaking, sign buzzing like a fly. I parked 2 lots over and killed my lights. The Mustang idled as if it liked being noticed, then slipped into a slot in front of room 12. Curtains breathed. A porch bulb flickered twice and held. I tasted metal and coffee and something like the end of patience. I didn't move in close. Evidence works best when it comes to you. I set my phone on the dash, time-stamped the stop, and let the night take notes. If you've ever stared at a cheap motel window long enough, you learn the language of outlines. The lamp makes an oval. The curtain makes a frame. Bodies write their own headlines. I watched the shadows move, slow, then quicker, then still. No faces, no kisses you can print, just enough to know what a jury of neighbors would conclude. A train moaned on the far tracks, and I remembered how Linda used to press her feet against mine in winter to steal heat. That memory turned brittle in my hands. I marked the time, noted the pattern, in, lights on, blinds almost shut, lights off, and then a pause long enough to humiliate a man who'd done his best. My phone camera caught the comings and goings of cars, the door, the number 12 glowing like a dare. The sky deepened to the color of old bruises. When the door opened again, I leaned forward and braced. When you're young, you think anger is a fire hose. Aim and blast. Middle age teaches you it's gasoline. I sat in my truck and let the first wave hit. Heat in the neck, hands shaking, a buzzing behind the eyes. I clenched the wheel until the textured plastic hurt and pictured every possible scene I could make. None ended well. A man can win an argument and lose his house in the same hour. I thought about Emily's science project still drying on the dining room table. I thought about the letter from the bank that I hadn't mailed yet, the one that kept the lot afloat. I thought about my father telling me on the day he left the mill, "Hold your line, son. Don't swing wild." I counted 10 slow breaths and took an 11th. When I opened my eyes, the night had cooled a shade. I pulled my phone closer. If I couldn't stop this, I'd document it. The latch clicked. Linda stepped into the porch light like nothing was wrong with gravity. Hair loosened, dress askew in the ways that don't happen on accident. She checked the window for her reflection and smoothed the fabric that didn't forgive. Her hand went to her purse, to her phone, to the necklace Emily gave her last Mother's Day. She looked left, looked right, looked nowhere near me. A second shadow appeared in the doorway, taller, broader, the haircut of a man who checks mirrors. He said something low. She laughed the way you laugh when you think you've gotten away with it. He touched her wrist. They kissed like they were late to someplace better. Then she walked to her Civic, adjusted her skirt again, and drove toward town with the kind of careful you use when you've already been reckless. I let the camera roll. Some things you only want to explain once. She turned. I didn't. Windows fog truth. Metal carries it. 2 nights later at Miller's Point, wind pushed sound along the hillside like a conveyor belt. I parked down the slope with the zoom lens steady. Shadows on the curtains, outlines against the lamp. A picture speaks louder than an argument. Every frame time-stamped, every angle steady. You don't need stolen voices when the walls already tell on you. I kept still long enough for doubt to get bored. When the engine finally coughed awake and the taillights slipped past, I checked the waveform, spikes and valleys, a story you could play back. I pressed save and named it Proof. At my kitchen table with the radio low and the house asleep, I put in earbuds and listened like a mechanic listens for a knock. It didn't take long. Linda's voice, the one that used to say my name like home, flattened into a sentence that fit no version of us I recognized. Jack's a loser. She meant me, however she said it there. The word landed like a lug nut in a garbage disposal. I paused, rewound, made sure I hadn't misheard, and then let it play again until the edges went dull from repetition. Hearing it didn't break me. It filed me down to a point. I took the buds out, stacked the other evidence on the table, the GPS logs, the motel timestamps, the note cards with dates and smells, and I felt something settle. Not peace, not rage, direction. The last thing I did before bed was copy the file to a second drive. Sometimes, survival is redundancy. I woke up without the usual fog. Pain has a way of narrowing your to-do list. On a fresh card, I wrote 2 columns, satisfying and smart. Under satisfying, I scribbled every scene 15-year-old me wanted, yelling in front of customers, denting a hood, calling his mother. Then I crossed out the column. Under smart, I wrote, protect Emily, protect the business, protect the house. Evidence beats volume. Paper beats rumor. I don't have to destroy anyone. I only have to show the truth to the people who count. I am not a saint. I am a man who likes to sleep indoors. So I built the order of operations the way I'd plan a major engine job. Secure parts, read the manual, follow the sequence, test. My hands itched to do something that would make noise. Instead, I cleaned the coffee pot, kissed my daughter's head, and put on my work boots. Today would be for leverage. At lunch, I walked into the bank where they know my first name and asked to review our joint accounts. Nothing sneaky, nothing that would make a lawyer raise an eyebrow, just moving the lion's share into an account in my name, for business continuity, with proper documentation. I explained it like a man securing payroll, because that's what it was. The manager nodded the way people nod when they understand more than you're saying. I left a paper trail neat enough for a judge to admire. I didn't clean us out. I narrowed the lane. At 50, you learn money isn't love, but it is oxygen. Later, at the lot, I scanned copies into a folder I titled with a date instead of a feeling. When I locked the office, I stood for a moment and listened to the building settle. The roof creaked like old bones in a good chair. One piece, in place. Several to go. I slept better. The post office still smells like cardboard and ink and a government that runs on forms. I filled one out to rent a P.O. box and another to forward selected mail there. I asked the clerk about turnaround times and smiled like a man planning a fishing trip. She slid a small brass key across the counter. It felt heavier than its size. Back home, I tucked it onto my ring between the truck and the shop keys. Information moves faster than cars these days, but envelopes still carry the kind of secrets people under 30 forget exist. Statements, notices, offers you never asked for. If Linda planned to change our weather, she'd have to do it without my forecasts. I labeled a file, Mail, Hold, and set a reminder to check the box on Tuesdays and Fridays. Belt and suspenders. Old school, maybe. But old school kept my father fed after the layoff. I slid the key into my pocket and kept moving. I don't trust the internet to teach me how to keep my child. I trust librarians. I sat at a wooden table that had seen better presidents and asked for books on Pennsylvania divorce and property. The clerk didn't blink. She stacked codes and plain English guides in front of me, and I read until the afternoon thinned. Marital assets, fault and no fault. How judges hear words like stability and best interest. I made notes without adjectives. What matters in rooms with flags are dates, receipts, recordings, and the steady way you present them. I called a local attorney 2 towns over to confirm what I'd learned and booked a consult for Thursday. Not to start a war. To know the ground. On my way out, I passed the children's section and watched a young dad read to a little boy who asked too many questions. I smiled despite myself. I had answers now. I just needed to use them right. People leave paper trails the way trucks leave ruts. Tyler was no different. Public records gave me his middle name, a recent address, and a date of birth that fit the jaw. County dockets coughed up 2 DUIs. A civil filing in Akron named him in a child support case with a balance in arrears. I didn't gloat. I wrote down the case numbers and photocopied what I was allowed, then stopped by Rick's Auto and asked about a tech named Grant. Rick's eyes did a quick math problem and came up with unreliable. Big Mike confirmed he'd towed that red Mustang twice for neglect. The pattern wasn't a surprise. Boys who borrow shine from fast cars often skip oil changes. I drove past the apartment listed on the filing and saw a mailbox with his last name in fading marker. No confrontation. Not yet. It was enough to know which bolts would loosen with the least force. I had my wrench. I cleared my workbench and set my notes in rows like parts before a build. Column 1. Evidence, GPS logs, timestamps, audio file, photos of room 12. Column 2, protections, bank documents, P.O. box key, attorney consult. Column 3, leverage, case numbers, employer contact, the list of bars where his bragging made witnesses. The plan read simple. Keep calm, keep records, keep pressure where it counts, no scenes, no shouting. If Linda stayed, we rebuilt with truth. If she left, I met her in court with facts. As for Tyler, I didn't need to hurt him. I needed him to see the bill. I packed a small toolkit, not for violence but for reminders, a flashlight, gloves, a notepad. Then I set an alarm for the hour when men like him feel invincible and towns like ours go quiet. The tracker dot rested near the motel again. I turned off my office light and locked the door. Time to begin the next phase. I set the good plates we save for holidays and lit 2 candles that smelled like someone else's house. Emily finished homework and went upstairs with headphones, mercifully deaf to the performance. Linda came down in the blue dress I bought the year we still took pictures without trying. She smiled like a hostess greeting a stranger. We ate slow, chicken over rice, polite talk about soccer schedules, and a roof leak I already fixed. I poured wine, steady hands, steady voice, and asked about work. She said busy and stared at the candle. The thing about middle age is you can act married long after you stop being a couple. When the plates were clean and the small talk dead, I cleared my throat and set my phone on the table between us, screen down, like a card I planned to turn over. "I'd like to listen to something," I said, and the way she swallowed told me she already knew what. I tapped the screen and her voice filled our dining room, hushed, breathless, a woman who forgot the walls had ears. The Mustang's suspension creaked, wind pulled at the mic, and then the sentence that didn't belong to any life we built. "He's a loser." Not poetry, not context, just a blade. Linda's wine glass found the wrong angle and shattered, red sliding across wood like a map to somewhere worse. She reached for the phone, stopped, reached for the napkin instead, and pressed it to the spill like she could plug a vein. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I let the audio run its short course, and then I tapped pause. The house went quiet except for the old fridge humming the same note it always hums when something's going bad. "No yelling," I said. "No scenes, just truth." Her mouth opened and closed twice like a fish learning air. "Please," she whispered, and I slid the phone away. Linda's face crumpled the way paper does when you finally write on it. She said I didn't understand. She said it wasn't what it sounded like. She said a dozen things you say when the door you kept shut opens without your permission. I folded my hands so I wouldn't point, so I wouldn't count the lies for her. "Look at me," I said, and when she did, I saw the woman I married and the stranger who replaced her standing in the same light. "Do you love him?" The question sat there like a nail in a tire. She cried harder and said she didn't know. People our age know how little that answer buys. I passed her a towel for the wine. "I'm not here to argue feelings," I said. "I'm here to stop the damage." The tears didn't stop. The excuses did. For 1 minute, at last, we were honest. Not about love, but about the mess we'd made. "I'm not asking," I said. "You're going to end it. Tonight. In person. No more messages, no more shadows. You'll tell him not to call, not to come near you, not to drift within a mile of our daughter." She shook her head like I'd asked for weather to change. "He won't listen." "Then hear me. If he doesn't, I make it public. I make it legal. I make it expensive." She stared at the table, at the cracked line in the varnish we never fixed, and understood the shape of the choice. I wasn't promising forgiveness. I was buying time. "Fine," she said finally, voice small. "I'll go." "You'll go now," I said, and slid her keys across the wood. She stood, wiped her face, and smoothed a dress that wouldn't smooth. At the door she looked back, as if to ask for a softer sentence. I gave her a nod instead. The latch clicked. The house exhaled. My plan inhaled. When you love someone long enough, you can tell how a drive went by the way the engine shuts off. 40 minutes later, the Civic died in our driveway with a tired cough. Linda came in white-faced, eyes swelling at the edges. "It's done," she said, and the lie in those words wasn't about the breakup. It was about endings. "How'd he take it?" I asked. "Badly. He said he's coming to talk to you, man to man." The phrase dragged its knuckles on the floor. I nodded like I'd expected it all along. She went upstairs without touching the banister. I poured the remains of the bottle into a short glass and didn't drink. You can't outpace a storm by running. You survive it by tying down what matters. I checked the audio file twice, the bank receipts once, and the note cards that now read like a map. When the house finally went still, I heard what I was waiting for. Nothing. I sat with a glass I didn't need and a pen I did. Older men understand the comfort of a good list. I wrote 3 headers: home, business, court. Under home, I scribbled locks, passwords, Emily's routines, the name of a counselor a friend once swore by. Under business, I wrote Rose's raise, the insurance contact, the camera that needs a new angle. Under court, I listed the attorney's appointment, the copies to make, the calm I'd bring to any room with a flag. I added one more column and titled it Tyler. 3 bullet points: employer, case numbers, witnesses. No verbs. Verbs come later. The whiskey stared back at me. I dumped it in the sink and watched it run, amber to nothing. If he showed up tomorrow, I'd be ready. If he showed up tonight, I'd be more than ready. I turned off the porch light and left the kitchen lamp on. The way you set a trap that's really a mirror. 2 evenings later, just before close, the red Mustang rolled in like it paid the mortgage. The engine growled for effect. Young men mistake volume for presence. Tyler climbed out in a black t-shirt 1 size too small and a look he'd practiced in glass. He walked toward the office with his hands open, then turned them into fists at his sides. I stepped out and shut the door behind me, let the bell jingle and the quiet settle. "You Jack Turner?" he asked, though he already knew. "I am," I said. "You must be the boy who thinks a car can make him bulletproof." His jaw twitched. "We need to talk." He stood 6 feet away. That's a distance men choose when they don't want to be the one who closes it. "About Linda," he said, and my name for her sounded rented in his mouth. I nodded at the empty bay. "Fine. Let's keep this where we fix things." We stood under fluorescent lights that spare no one. Tyler started with bravado, how Linda loved him, how I was in the way, how this wasn't my business. "She's my wife," I said. "That makes it my business and your mistake." He said she only ended it because I threatened her. "I didn't threaten," I said. "I informed." He puffed up, then shrank half an inch when I didn't flinch. This is where men our age have an advantage. We've outlived our own noise. I told him we were done with sneaking. He said he wouldn't stop. I asked if he could even spell restraining order. He blinked at the syllables. "You think you can scare me?" he said. "I don't have to," I replied. "I can outlast you." He stepped closer. The air charged like a summer storm. I held my ground and didn't give him the thunder he wanted. The bay stayed quiet. My temper stayed paid. His didn't. I set a folder on the fender and opened it like a menu. "Here's what happens next if you keep orbiting my house," I said. 2 DUI case numbers with dates. A child support action out of Akron, amount past due in black and white. Your current employer who expects you Tuesday at 8. And a half-dozen regulars at Murphy's who heard you brag about a married woman and will remember better if the sheriff asks. He went pale at Akron. He went quieter at employer. "You can't," he started. "I can send a letter. I can make a phone call. I can press play in the right room. I'm not trying to ruin you, son. I'm offering you a cheaper exit." He looked at the papers like they might burn him. "She doesn't love you," I said. Not cruel, just accurate. "She loved the mirror you handed her." He opened his mouth, found nothing useful in it, and shut it again. He backed off half a step, pride limping more than his feet. "This isn't over," he said, less roar than habit. "It is if you want to keep what little you have," I answered. The engine of the Mustang coughed when he turned the key, a sound I know well. Maintenance deferred, consequences arriving. He stared at me through the windshield like I'd stolen a future he hadn't earned yet. "Tell Linda I said she knows where to find me," he tried, a last flag planted in wet sand. "No," I said. "You tell her nothing." He revved for the attention and got none. Gravel kicked, taillights dwindled. I stood there with my pulse still, my hands empty, my plan intact. The bay light buzzed above me like a fly that didn't understand windows. Rosa poked her head out and asked if everything was okay. "For now," I said, and meant the warning in both directions. At dawn, Rosa called me back to the lot. 3 cars sat wounded, tires knifed, a windshield spidered, a long key mark carving a confession down a clean door. On the office chair lay a note in block letters that thought anonymity was armor. "Stay away from my girl." I took pictures before I touched anything. I called the police, then the insurance, then the customer whose sedan now whistled when it shouldn't. I didn't say Tyler's name first. The officer wrote it down anyway. Small towns teach cops the difference between random and message. Emily texted to ask if she could stay after school for practice. I told her yes, with a heart emoji I don't use easily. Linda stayed in the kitchen, small and quiet, not asking the question because she knew the answer. I swept glass into a bin and kept the bin. Evidence lives in bags. Pride lives in posture. I straightened mine and waited for the next call. 3 days later, Deputy Harris left a voicemail. "We found a red Mustang off County Road 9, burned to frame, no occupants." I drove out anyway and stood behind the tape, the air still sour with plastic and a life that ran too hot. The chassis lay like a skeleton no one would claim. A tow truck winched what was left onto a flatbed with a scream you could feel in your teeth. Harris said Tyler's apartment was empty, job abandoned, mailbox cleared. People think running a race is debt. It only changes the address on the bill. I thanked the deputy, gave a simple statement, and didn't mention the quiet relief settling in my ribs. Back at the lot, I finished the estimate for the vandalized cars and handed Rosa the afternoon off. The shop smelled like solvent and second chances. I locked the office and looked at my reflection in the glass. Men my age don't celebrate. We keep going. The morning after the note and the slashed tires, Linda said she was sorry. Not once, over and over, like scrubbing a stain that won't lift. She said she was scared, she was confused, she made a mistake. Older folks know the rhythm. Apologies arrive in bunches when truth gets expensive. I brewed coffee, set a mug in front of her, and kept my voice low. I believe you're sorry, I said. I don't believe it changes the last 3 months. She reached for my hand. I wrapped both of mine around the cup. Heat helps you think. I told her there'd be no yelling and no guessing, only steps. Guest room for now. No contact with Tyler. Not a text. Not a wish. Therapy, schedules, transparency, or we end this with lawyers. She nodded too fast, like agreement could undo evidence. It can't. A car that's been rear-ended may still drive straight, but the frame remembers. So do people. I did. That week I wrote out the conditions like a repair order. Counseling twice a month, joint calendars, shared passwords, no cash pulled from the joint account without a receipt. If she needed time away, it happened in daylight and had a return time. We told Emily together that Mom and Dad were working through grown-up problems, and that none of it was her fault. She asked if we were getting divorced. I said we were fixing things first. I meant, we're fixing the part that still can be fixed, our daughter's sense of gravity. Linda tried. She cooked favorite meals and put framed photos back on the mantel. She sat closer on the couch but didn't quite touch. When she laughed, it sounded like someone remembering how. Middle age teaches you to hear what's under the radio. I could make out the knock, guilt, fear, and something I couldn't torque tight. I kept the list on the fridge anyway. Some repairs hold. On a Tuesday that smelled like rain and brake dust, a process server handed me a manila envelope at the lot. Turner? He asked. I signed and slid the papers onto my desk blotter. Petition for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. It's a phrase that sounds clean because a mop stood nearby. I poured coffee, called my attorney, and then drove home to tell Emily before she heard it from a porch. Linda sat at the table, eyes rimmed red, already knowing what I knew. We'd hit the part of the road where the detour sign isn't a suggestion. We spoke softly, the way people do in hospitals and churches. Later, I walked the perimeter of the house, checking locks I'd checked 1,000 times, and felt the old need to fix something with my hands. Instead, I opened the file cabinet and found the binder I'd built in quiet. When the storm finally comes, you don't outrun it. You stand where you chose. My attorney, a calm woman who's seen more endings than weddings, flipped through tabs labeled with dates instead of anger. GPS logs, motel timestamps, bank transfers annotated to show who paid for what and when. A transcript of the audio file, backed by the audio itself. Witness names from Murphys who could repeat the brag without embellishment. Photos of the vandalism, the police report, the insurance claim numbers. You've done your homework, she said, which is another way of saying, you've stayed sane. We talked custody first, Emily's routines, school, my business hours, Linda's schedule. Judges don't care about revenge, they care about stability. I left the office lighter than I expected to. Not happy, steady. In the parking lot, I watched a father buckle a toddler into a car seat while the kid kicked his shoes off, laughing. That's the job, I thought. Keep the kids safe while the car is moving. I had the map. Now came the drive. Courtrooms make everyone sit up straighter. The wood, the seal, the hum of the fluorescent lights. Nothing there belongs to you, and that's the point. Linda looked small in a sweater I used to like. Her lawyer asked questions meant to turn me into a bully. I kept my hands where the judge could see them and answered like invoices. Yes, no, on this date, at this time. When my attorney played the audio from Miller's Point, the room changed temperature. No one gasped. They just stopped blinking for a second. We submitted receipts for motel rooms, traced from our joint account to places I never slept. We outlined the vandalism and the note without throwing names like punches. Then we talked about Emily, homework, bedtime, practice rides, the way she chews her pencil when she's thinking. The judge wrote and wrote some more. "I'll take this under advisement," she said. The gavel didn't fall, but something else did. The weight did. The order arrived 2 weeks later, primary physical custody to me, with Linda's parenting time scheduled and supervised to start, subject to review. The house stayed with Emily and me. The lot, of course, was mine. No alimony. A settlement that made sense on paper instead of in a dream. I read each page like a parts list, then set it down and sat very still. People think relief is loud. Sometimes it's the first deep breath you've taken in months. Linda cried in the kitchen, and I didn't hate her for it. You can love the mother of your child and still insist she face the bill. I texted Rosa that I'd be in late and took Emily for pancakes before school. She drowned them in syrup and chattered about a field trip. Life is rude that way. It keeps going. On the drive back, she reached for the radio and then for my hand. We both held on. Rust Creek doesn't do secrets. It does updates. Big Mike said he heard from a tow guy in Summit County that Tyler's working a car wash outside Akron, the kind with a faded rainbow arch and a coin changer that eats dollars. Someone else mentioned garnishments, child support finally catching him by the paycheck. Word was he'd moved in with his ex in a trailer park behind a line of cottonwoods, rent cheap if you don't mind the trains. I didn't grin. I didn't frown. I checked a box in my head labeled Consequences Others. When a man runs, he learns geography isn't grace. Bills relocate. So do stories. Back at the lot, I replaced a serpentine belt on a minivan for a mom who couldn't afford a surprise. She thanked me twice. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and felt nothing grand, just the right kind of tired. Tyler could chase mirrors. I had real glass to clean. On a Friday, I stopped by Murphy's for a beer that tastes like habit. Maria slid onto the next stool and said, "You hear about Tyler Grant?" I shrugged. She told it like most folks do, short scenes, clean lines, car wash, trailer, X. Word is he doesn't brag anymore. "That was some ice cold you did," she said, not unkind. "No fists, just facts." I stared at the mirror behind the bottles where a thinner man once stood with a younger woman at his elbow. "I didn't win," I said. "I protected what I could." She nodded, like someone who's kept her own lists. The jukebox coughed up an old Springsteen track about towns like ours. I left a 10 on the bar and told Maria to keep the change. Outside, Main Street was mostly dark, but the barber pole still spun. Some routines survive even when the money doesn't. I zipped my jacket and headed home to my daughter. Winter settled in like an old dog, slow, heavy, familiar. The mill stayed quiet. Storefronts kept their "for lease" signs like name tags that won't peel off. But the lot's lights came on every morning, and Emily's cleats still thudded the back steps, and the coffee tasted like coffee. People think survival is a banner you wave. It's closer to maintenance. Oil changes on time, bills paid, hard talks finished, no more pretending. I kept the binder in a lower drawer, not to revisit the hurt, but to remember the lesson. Control what you can, document what you must, love who depends on you. On Sundays, I still sit in the same pew, third from the back, and sing off key on purpose. When the sermon hits forgiveness, I listen without nodding. I'm not there yet. Maybe I never will be. The town can keep dying slow if it wants. I'm not. I stand up, count my blessings, and go back to work. Murphy's smells like lemon cleaner and a decade of spilled years. I sit under the neon and catch myself in the back bar mirror, a man who still shows up. I raise the glass, not to victory, but to maintenance, the small, unglamorous work that kept my daughter steady and my roof over us. Turns out the house was never the problem. It was me finally waking up. Revenge wasn't fists. It was paperwork, patience, and the spine to let facts speak. Tyler's noise burned out. Linda's choices found their bill. Mine did too. Boundaries, custody, sleep. Outside, Rust Creek hums its tired hymn, but the lot opens at 8, and tomorrow still needs brake pads. I leave cash on the bar and button my coat. If you're my age, you know this truth. Peace isn't given, it's managed. My story doesn't end, it idles, ready for the next mile. Your turn to drive. If it were you, would you forgive or get even?